After serving his country for 25 years, Bill Hanlon deserved a peaceful retirement. The 67-year-old Air Force veteran had earned his quiet life on a small Iowa farm, tending to his late wife's beloved garden and finding solace in simple routines. When strange dark bumps started appearing on his back, he brushed them off as just another sign of getting older. A routine visit to the VA clinic should have been nothing more than a quick checkup. But when the young doctor saw the markings, her face went white. The bumps weren't random pimples or age spots. They formed a perfect pattern across his skin, like coordinates or some kind of code. Soon, classified medical teams were asking questions about a mission Bill thought was buried forever. What really happened at that remote radar station back in 1987? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Hanlon farm as Bill stepped onto his front porch, coffee mug in hand. At 67, he still woke before dawn, a habit ingrained by decades of military reveille that no amount of civilian comfort could shake. The Iowa countryside stretched before him in waves of golden corn and emerald soybeans, a sight that never failed to bring him a measure of peace. He walked the familiar path to Martha's garden, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. 3 years had passed since her funeral, yet he maintained every flower bed with the same devotion she'd shown. The roses were her pride-deep crimson climbers that scaled the white picket fence she'd insisted on installing their first year. "Here, makes it feel like home," she'd said. And she'd been right. Bill set his mug on the weathered bench they'd shared countless mornings and knelt beside the dahlia bed. The late summer blooms were Martha's favorites, their bold faces turned toward the rising sun like faithful sentries. He pulled a few weeds, his weathered hands gentle among the delicate stems. "Morning, sweetheart," he whispered to the framed photograph tucked among the flowers. Martha smiled back at him from behind the glass, her silver hair catching sunlight, dirt-stained gardening gloves on her hands. That picture had been taken just months before the cancer took her. She'd been so proud of her prize-winning tomatoes. That year, the sound of gravel crunching announced a visitor. Bill looked up to see Frank Morrison's battered pickup truck rumbling up the drive. Frank had been Bill's wingman for 15 years, through 3 deployments and more classified missions than either man cared to remember. Now, they were just 2 old soldiers drinking coffee and complaining about their aching joints. "You're up early, even for you," Frank called out as he climbed from the truck. At 65, Frank carried himself with the same military bearing that marked all career Air Force men, though his hair had gone completely white and his face showed every one of his years. "Garden doesn't tend itself," Bill replied, standing and brushing dirt from his knees. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." They settled on the porch, 2 comfortable old friends watching the world wake up. Frank sipped his coffee and studied Bill with the keen eyes that had once spotted enemy aircraft at impossible distances. "You look tired, Bill. You sleeping okay?" Bill shrugged. He'd been having strange dreams lately, fragments of memories from missions he'd thought buried. Men in hazmat suits, instrument panels flashing urgent warnings, voices on radio frequencies that shouldn't have existed. "Just getting old, I suppose. We all are." Frank set down his mug. "Speaking of which, when's the last time you saw a doctor? Martha used to keep you honest about that sort of thing." The question hit closer to home than Bill cared to admit. He'd noticed the dark spots on his back weeks ago while shaving. At first, he dismissed them as age spots or maybe irritation from his old work shirts. But they'd been spreading, forming an odd pattern he couldn't ignore. "I'm fine, Frank. Tough as nails, remember? Tough as nails doesn't make you bulletproof." Frank's voice carried the authority of a man who'd pulled Bill out of more than one dangerous situation. "Martha would have had you at the clinic by now." Before Bill could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his daughter's name, and he felt the familiar mix of joy and concern that came with every call from Chicago. "Hi, Lucy. Dad, how are you feeling? You sounded tired when we talked yesterday." Lucy Hanlon Pierce had inherited her mother's nurturing instincts and her father's stubborn determination. At 38, she managed a nonprofit organization that helped veterans transition to civilian life work that made Bill immensely proud and occasionally worried about her stress levels. "I'm sitting on the porch with Frank, drinking coffee and watching the corn grow. Life doesn't get much better, Dad." Lucy's voice carried that particular tone children use when they're about to lecture their parents. "When's the last time you had a physical? A real one, not just checking your blood pressure at the pharmacy." Frank smirked and mouthed, "Told you so. I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about your old man." "That's exactly when I worry most. Promise me you'll make an appointment. For my peace of mind, if not your own." Bill looked out at Martha's roses, imagining her shaking her head at his stubbornness. She'd always been the practical one, the one who insisted on regular checkups and taking vitamins. "All right, Lucy, I'll call the VA clinic today. Thank you. I love you, Dad." "Love you too, sweetheart." After hanging up, Bill sat quietly for a moment. Frank waited, understanding the weight of daughters who worried about their fathers. "She's right, Frank said finally, "and Martha would agree." "I know." Bill rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the strange raised bumps that had been bothering him. "It's probably nothing, but you'll feel better knowing for sure." Frank stood and stretched. "Want me to drive you? I've got nothing but time these days." "I can manage a trip to the clinic, Frank. I'm not an invalid." "Didn't say you were. Just offering to keep you company." Bill considered this. Frank had been his steadiest friend for decades, the kind of man you wanted in your corner when trouble came calling. And lately, Bill had been feeling like trouble might be closer than he cared to admit. "Thanks. I'll call and see when they can fit me in." The Cedar Falls VA Clinic occupied a modern building on the edge of town, all glass and steel, that looked nothing like the military hospitals Bill remembered from his active duty days. Dr. Sarah Chen was young enough to be his granddaughter, with intelligent dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the earnest demeanor of someone who'd chosen medicine to help people. "Master Sergeant Hanlon," she said, reviewing his file on her tablet. "It's been almost 2 years since your last physical. How have you been feeling?" "Fine, mostly. My daughter insisted I come in." Bill settled on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him. "There are some spots on my back that have been bothering me. Probably nothing serious." Dr. Chum's expression remained professionally neutral, but Bill caught a flicker of increased attention that his military training recognized as significant. "Can you describe these spots? When did you first notice them?" "Few weeks ago. Dark bumps, not painful exactly, but..." Bill paused, trying to find the right words. "They feel warm sometimes, and they seem to be arranged in a pattern." Dr. Chum made notes on her tablet. "I'd like to take a look, if that's okay. Can you remove your shirt and turn around?" Bill complied, feeling suddenly self-conscious. He heard Dr. Chum's sharp intake of breath and knew his instincts had been correct. Something was wrong. "Master Sergeant, I need to examine these more closely. The pattern you mentioned, it's quite distinct." Bill felt her gloved fingers tracing the markings on his back, gentle but thorough. Her touch lingered on certain spots, and he could practically hear her mental calculations. "Doctor, what exactly are you seeing back there?" There was a long pause before she answered. "I'd like to take some photographs and measurements, with your permission. These markings are unusual. They appear to follow a very specific geometric arrangement." Bill's military instinct sharpened. In his experience, when doctors started using words like unusual and specific, it usually meant trouble. How unusual? I've never seen anything quite like this. Dr. Chun moved to her computer and began typing rapidly. I'd like to order some additional tests, including imaging studies. There might be a dermatologist or even a specialist I should consult with. What kind of specialist? Bill's voice carried the edge that had once intimidated Junior Airman Doctor. Chun hesitated. I'm not entirely sure yet. Let me make some calls and see what we're dealing with. In the meantime, I'd like you to keep track of any changes, size, color, sensation. Can you do that? Bill nodded, though uneasiness was settling in his chest like fog rolling across a battlefield. He'd learned long ago to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him this was bigger than a few age spots. As he dressed, Bill watched Dr. Chen through the partly open door. She was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. He caught fragments, unprecedented pattern, possible. Consultation, need to verify protocols. The word protocols made Bill's blood run cold. In his world, protocols usually meant classified procedures and government involvement. He'd hoped those days were behind him forever. Dr. Chun returned with a forced smile. I'll have the results of your blood work in a few days. In the meantime, please call immediately if you notice any changes in the markings or if you experience any unusual symptoms. What kind of unusual symptoms should I be watching for? Fever, nausea, dizziness, memory issues. Anything that seems out of the ordinary for you. Memory issues. Bill felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Lately, he'd been having those strange dreams, fragments of missions he'd thought were buried in classified files. Voices speaking in frequencies that shouldn't exist. Lights in the sky that defied explanation. Doctor, these markings, do they look like anything you've seen in medical literature? Dr. Chun met his eyes, and he saw something there that confirmed his worst fears. No, Master Sergeant. They don't look like anything in any medical literature I know of. As Bill left the clinic, Frank waiting in the parking lot, he felt the weight of decades pressing down on him. Martha's garden suddenly seemed very far away, and the peaceful retirement he'd worked so hard to build felt as fragile as morning frost. How did it go? Frank asked as they drove home. Bill stared out at the familiar Iowa landscape, knowing it would never look quite the same again. I think our quiet days might be coming to an end, old friend. Frank glanced at him sharply. What does that mean? It means we might need to remember some things we swore we'd forget. The sun was setting behind them as they pulled into Bill's driveway, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Martha's garden waited in the fading light, peaceful and eternal. Bill touched the photograph in his pocket, his anchor to the life he'd built after the military, but his darkness fell over. Cedar Falls. Bill Hanlon couldn't shake the feeling that his past was finally coming home to roost. The call came 3 days later, just as Bill was finishing his morning coffee on the porch. Dr. Chen's voice carried a tension that made his old instincts flare to life. Master Sergeant Hanlon, I need you to come in today. This morning, if possible. What? Did the test show, Doctor? A pause. Too long. I'd rather discuss this in person. Can you be here by 10? Bill glanced at his watch. 9:15. I'll be there. He called Frank, who arrived within minutes. No questions asked. That was the thing about old military friendships. When trouble called, you responded without hesitation. The clinic seemed different somehow as they walked through the automatic doors. More security guards than usual. A man in a dark suit reading a newspaper near the information desk, but his eyes tracked their movement with professional interest. Bill Hanlon? The receptionist's smile seemed forced. Dr. Chun is waiting for you in exam room 3. Your friend can wait in the lobby. I'd prefer he come with me. I'm sorry, but it's fine, Bill. Frank squeezed his shoulder. I'll be right here when you need me. Bill followed the receptionist down a hallway that seemed longer than before. Exam room 3 was larger than the one he'd been in previously, with additional equipment he didn't recognize. Dr. Chun waited beside what looked like a sophisticated scanner, her young face drawn with worry. "Thank you for coming so quickly." She closed the door and activated what Bill recognized as a white noise generator. "Master Sergeant, what I'm about to show you needs to stay strictly between us for now. Doctor, you're making me nervous." "Doctor." Chun moved to her computer and pulled up what looked like a medical scan. "These are the imaging results from your back. The markings go much deeper than we initially thought. They extend into the subcutaneous tissue, following very precise pathways." Bill studied the screen. The pattern was undeniable, a complex geometric arrangement that looked almost like a circuit board mapped across his skin and deeper tissues. "What exactly am I looking at, Doctor?" "I've consulted with colleagues across the country. No one has seen anything like this." Dr. Chun pulled up another image. "But that's not the most concerning part. The markings appear to be changing in real time. They're becoming more defined, more complex." Bill felt his mouth go dry. "Changing how?" Watch this." Dr. Chun played a time-lapse sequence showing the markings over the past 72 hours. Bill watched in fascination and growing dread as the pattern shifted and evolved. New connections forming, existing lines deepening. "This is impossible," he whispered. "I thought so too, until I ran a mathematical analysis." Dr. Chun's fingers flew over the keyboard. "The pattern isn't random, Master Sergeant. It's following a very specific algorithm. Look at this overlay." She superimposed a grid over the scan, and Bill's blood turned to ice water. The markings aligned perfectly with what looked like coordinate systems, latitude and longitude markers that meant something, even if he couldn't remember what. "Doctor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you shared these results with anyone outside your normal medical channels?" Dr. Chun's hesitation told him everything he needed to know. "My department head required copies of all unusual cases. It's standard protocol for anything we can't immediately diagnose." Her voice dropped. "But there's something else. This morning, I received instructions to suspend any further testing until specialist consultants arrive." "What kind of specialists?" "They didn't say. But they're coming from Washington, and they have full authority to take over your case." Bill stood up slowly, his mind racing through possibilities he'd hoped never to consider again. "How long before they get here?" "They should be arriving." Dr. Chun glanced at her watch and paled. "They should be here now." As if summoned by her words, someone knocked on the exam room door. Not the gentle tap of medical staff, but the authoritative rap of people accustomed to having doors open for them immediately. "Dr. Chun, we need to speak with you and your patient." Bill met Dr. Chun's eyes and saw his own fear reflected there. "Doctor, before you open that door, I need you to know something. Whatever they tell you about me, whatever they say about my service record, remember that I'm still the same man who came to you for help." She nodded, though he could see the questions building behind her eyes. The door opened to reveal two men and one woman, all wearing the kind of unremarkable business attire that screamed federal agents. The lead man flashed credentials too quickly to read properly. "Master Sergeant Hanlon, I'm Agent Crawford with the Department of Defense Medical Research Division. Dr. Chun, we'll need to speak with your patient privately." "This is highly irregular," Dr. Chun protested. "Master Sergeant Hanlon is my patient, and I have a medical responsibility." "Doctor," the woman agent interrupted, "your patient's medical condition involves classified information that falls under national security protocols. We'll take it from here." Bill watched Dr. Chun's face as she processed this. To her credit, she didn't back down immediately. "I'll need to see proper authorization before I release any patient information or relinquish care." Agent Crawford produced a tablet and showed her something that made her face go pale. She looked at Bill with what he recognized as a mixture of concern and growing understanding. "Master Sergeant," Dr. Chun said carefully, "it appears these gentlemen have proper authority to discuss your case. However, as your physician, I want to ensure your medical needs continue to be met." "Thank you, Doctor. You've been very thorough and professional." Bill stood, noting how the agents positioned themselves to control the room's exits. "I assume this consultation will be brief?" "That depends entirely on your cooperation, Master Sergeant," Agent Crawford replied. "We need to discuss your service record, specifically your assignment to Blackwater Station in 1987. Bill felt the world shift around him. Blackwater Station, a name he'd been ordered never to speak, never to remember, never to acknowledge existed. The fact that these people knew about it meant his quiet retirement was officially over. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Agent." "Crawford, Master Sergeant, your medical condition is directly related to your service at that facility. We need to understand what's happening to you, and we need to understand it quickly." Dr. Chun looked between them, clearly recognizing that she was witnessing something far beyond normal medical practice. "Gentlemen, whatever you need to discuss, Master Sergeant Hanlon is still my patient. I insist on being present for any medical discussions." The female agent spoke for the first time. "Doctor, what you've documented in this patient represents a serious breach of containment protocols. We need to determine how much exposure has occurred and take appropriate steps." "Exposure to what?" Dr. Chun's voice rose slightly. Bill made a decision. These people clearly knew more than they were saying, and Dr. Chun deserved to understand what she'd gotten involved in. "Doctor, in 1987, I was assigned to a classified radar facility in Montana. Our mission was to monitor atmospheric anomalies. What we found there," he looked at the agents, who were watching him intently, "what we found there wasn't supposed to exist." Agent Crawford stepped forward. "Master Sergeant, you're venturing into classified territory." "With respect, sir, my medical condition seems to have declassified itself." Bill turned back to Dr. Chun. "The markings on my back correspond to something that happened during that mission. Something the government has spent 36 years trying to keep secret." Dr. Chun's scientific mind was clearly racing. "The coordinate patterns, they're related to a specific location?" "More than that," Bill said, feeling pieces of suppressed memory clicking into place. "They're related to specific events. Events that affected every man at that facility." The female agent moved closer. "Master Sergeant, we need to conduct a full medical evaluation immediately. Your condition may be contagious or pose other risks." "To whom?" "To everyone who's come into contact with you since the markings appeared." Bill felt ice form in his stomach. "Dr. Chun?" "We'll need to monitor Dr. Chun as well," Agent Crawford confirmed, "along with anyone else who's had extended contact with you." Bill thought of Frank waiting in the lobby, of Lucy in Chicago planning to visit next weekend, of the neighbors who stopped by regularly to check on him. His attempt at a quiet retirement had just endangered everyone he cared about. What exactly happened at Blackwater Station? Dr. Chun asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Agent Crawford checked his watch. "We have a secure facility where we can conduct proper debriefing and medical evaluation. Master Sergeant, you'll need to come with us immediately." "Am I under arrest?" "You're under medical quarantine pending evaluation. Dr. Chun, we'll need all your records and any equipment." "That's come into contact with the patient." Bill looked at the young doctor who'd shown such professionalism and concern. "Doctor, I'm sorry you got involved in this." "Don't be sorry," she said firmly. "Be careful. And remember, whatever they tell you about protocols and national security, you're still a human being with rights." As the agents escorted Bill from the exam room, he caught one last glimpse of Dr. Chun, carefully copying files onto a portable drive. Smart woman. In his experience, It was always wise to keep backup records. When the government started talking about national security, Frank was no longer in the lobby, and Bill felt a stab of worry. One of the agents noticed his concern. "Your friend is being debriefed separately. He'll be fine as long as he cooperates." Bill allowed himself to be led to a black SUV in the parking lot, his mind already working on escape scenarios and contingency plans. Martha's photograph remained in his pocket, a reminder of the peaceful life that was slipping away with each step. As Cedar Falls disappeared in the rearview mirror, Bill Hanlon realized that the most dangerous mission of his career was just beginning. And this time, he wasn't sure who the enemy was. The secure facility was nothing like Bill had expected. Instead of the sterile government buildings from his military days, this looked more like an upscale medical resort nestled in the rolling hills outside Cedar Rapids. The deception was intentional. A place where inconvenient people could disappear without raising suspicions. Bill's room was comfortable enough, with a window overlooking a peaceful garden that reminded him painfully of Martha's roses. But the glass was reinforced, the door locked from the outside, and he'd counted at least 6 cameras during his brief walk from the SUV. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, no relation to Frank, she'd assured him, was the facility's chief medical officer. She was perhaps 50, with silver hair and the kind of authoritative presence that suggested military training in her past. "Master Sergeant Hanlon, I want to assure you that we're here to help. Your condition is unprecedented, and we need to understand it for your safety and the safety of others." Bill sat in the examination chair, studying her face for tells. "Where's Frank Morrison? And Dr. Chun?" "Your friend is being debriefed in another section. Dr. Chun is assisting our technical team with her research data." Dr. Morrison began setting up what looked like advanced scanning equipment. "We need to understand how your condition has progressed since your initial medical visit." "My condition? Is that what we're calling it?" "Master Sergeant, what do you remember about your final mission at Blackwater Station?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind control panels bathed in red emergency lighting. Voices shouting coordinates over radio static. Something moving against the stars that shouldn't have been able to move that way. "I remember being ordered never to discuss it." Dr. Morrison nodded as she attached sensors to his arms and chest. "Those orders are still in effect. But your medical situation has forced us to reconsider certain protocols." "What medical situation, exactly?" Dr. Chun found some unusual markings. "That hardly seems like a national security crisis." "Master Sergeant, look at this." Dr. Morrison activated a wall-mounted monitor showing what looked like thermal imaging of his back. But this wasn't the static pattern Dr. Chun had shown him. This was actively changing, pulsing with rhythmic energy that looked almost like a heartbeat. The markings aren't just skin deep anymore. They're interfacing with your nervous system, creating new neural pathways. We've never seen anything like the cellular activity we're detecting. Bill stared at the monitor, watching patterns of light move across what was supposed to be his own body. "What does that mean for me?" "We don't know yet. But we know it's connected to what happened at Blackwater Station. And we know you're not the only one experiencing it." That got his attention. "Who else?" Dr. Morrison hesitated, then pulled up another file on her tablet. 3 other survivors from your unit have developed similar symptoms in the past 6 months. Unfortunately, we weren't able to locate them before. Before what? Before their conditions became critical. Bill felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Are they alive? 2 are in facilities similar to this one. The third, Dr. Morrison paused. The third experienced what we can only describe as spontaneous neural cascade failure. His brain activity spiked beyond measurable levels, then stopped completely. He's dead. His body is alive, but there's no brain function we can detect with conventional equipment. Bill thought about his unit at Blackwater Station. 12 men. Total. Assigned to what they've been told was routine atmospheric monitoring. Only 8 had returned from that final mission, and they'd been sworn to secrecy about what had happened to the other 4. "Doctor, I need to know something. The men who didn't make it back from that mission, what happened to them?" Dr. Morrison's expression grew carefully neutral. "What do you remember happening to them?" "Nothing. That's the problem. I remember suiting up for a routine equipment check, and then I remember being in a debriefing room 3 days later with no memory of what happened in between." Memory suppression was part of the containment protocol. Containment of what? Before Dr. Morrison could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and Bill heard the unmistakable sound of a building going into. Lockdown blast doors sealing, security systems activating. "What's happening?" Dr. Morrison was already moving toward the door, speaking into a communication device. "Security to Medical Suite 3 immediately. Initiate Containment Protocol 7. "Doctor, what's going on?" She turned back to him, and Bill saw something in her eyes he recognized from combat zones, barely controlled fear. "One of the other survivors just arrived. His condition has deteriorated rapidly during transport." She moved to a cabinet and began pulling out what looked like hazmat equipment. "Master Sergeant, I need you to remain exactly where you are and don't touch anything." Through the reinforced window, Bill could see people in full hazmat suits rushing past in the hallway. Whatever was happening, it was serious enough to scare people who dealt with classified medical emergencies for a living. "Is this what I have to look forward to?" Dr. Morrison paused in her preparations. "Master Sergeant, the markings on your back aren't just random patterns. They're coordinates, yes, but they're also something else. They appear to be a form of communication." "Communication with what?" "We're still trying to determine that. But the signals are getting stronger, and they're beginning to synchronize between survivors." Bill absorbed this information, his military training automatically cataloging threats and options. "Doctor, I need to ask you something directly. Are we dealing with some kind of biological weapon? Something from the Cold War that got out of control?" Dr. Morrison sealed her hazmat helmet and activated the communication system. Her voice came through tinny but clear. "Master Sergeant, what we're dealing with predates human weapons technology by a very long time." Before Bill could ask what she meant, the lights in his room flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. In that crimson glow, Bill felt the markings on his back begin to burn with an intensity that took his breath away. And somewhere in the facility, something that had once been human began to scream. Back in Cedar Falls, Lucy Hanlon Pierce was having the worst day of her professional life. She'd driven from Chicago the moment Dr. Chun called, only to find her father's house empty and his truck in the driveway. The neighbors knew nothing helpful. Mrs. Patterson had seen a black SUV at the house that morning, but thought it might have been government people doing a veterans benefit survey. Mr. Kelvin remembered seeing Frank Morrison's truck earlier, but hadn't seen either man leave. Lucy stood in her father's kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable clutter of his retirement life, and felt panic rising in her chest. This wasn't like him. Bill Hanlon was the most reliable person she'd ever known, a man who called when he said he would, who kept his promises, who never disappeared without explanation. Her phone rang, startling her from increasingly dark thoughts. "Miss Hanlon? This is Agent Sarah Crawford with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I understand you've been trying to locate your father." "Yes. Do you know where he is? Is he all right?" "Miss Hanlon, your father has been admitted to a specialized medical facility for evaluation of a service-related condition. He's receiving excellent care and will keep you updated on his progress." Lucy felt relief and suspicion in equal measure. "What medical facility?" "I'd like to speak with his doctor." "I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment due to the specialized nature of his treatment. But I can assure you that he's being treated by some of the best military medical personnel in the country. I want to see him." "That's not advisable. Right now, Miss Hanlon, your father's condition may be contagious, and we need to complete our evaluation before allowing visitors." Lucy's non-profit work had taught her to recognize bureaucratic stonewalling when she heard it. "Agent Crawford, with respect, my father called me 3 days ago about some skin markings his doctor wanted to examine. Now you're telling me he has a contagious condition that requires specialized military medical treatment?" There was a pause. "Miss Hanlon, your father's service record includes classified assignments that may be relevant to his current medical situation. We're following established protocols for handling such cases. I want to speak with Dr. Chun, the physician who was treating him. Dr. Chun is currently assisting our medical team with your father's case. She'll be available to speak with you once our evaluation is complete." Lucy hung up, more worried than ever. She'd learned long ago that when government agents started using words like protocols and evaluation, it usually meant someone was in serious trouble. She walked through her father's house, looking for any clues about what might have happened. In his bedroom, she found the drawer where he kept his military memorabilia commendation letters. Unit photos and documents she'd never seen before dotted the bottom of the drawer. Wrapped in oiled cloth was a small metallic device she didn't recognize. It looked almost like a compass, but with markings that weren't quite letters or numbers. When she picked it up, it felt warm to the touch, and she could swear she heard a faint humming sound as Lucy held the device up to the window. Trying to make sense of its purpose, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The device was pointing in a specific direction, and the humming was getting stronger. It was pointing toward whatever facility was holding her father, and it was trying to tell her something. Outside, hidden in a van across the street, Federal agents photographed her through telephoto lenses and made notes about potential security risks. Lucy Hanlon Pierce had just become a person of interest in a case that officially didn't exist. The hunt for the truth was about to become a family affair. The screaming had stopped, but the silence that followed was somehow worse. Bill sat in his containment room, the emergency lighting casting everything in shades of red that reminded him too vividly of that final night at Blackwater Station. The markings on his back had stopped burning, but he could feel them there, warm, active, almost alive. Dr. Morrison returned hours later, her hazmat suit replaced by standard medical clothing, though her face remained drawn with exhaustion and worry. "How bad was it?" Bill asked. "We lost him." She sat heavily in the chair across from him. "Master Sergeant David Kim. Did you know him well?" Bill closed his eyes, remembering Kim's laugh, his terrible jokes, his homesickness for California. "We called him Radar because he could spot atmospheric anomalies before our equipment could." "What happened to him?" "The markings reached a critical density and began generating electrical activity that overloaded his nervous system. His last words were coordinates, the same coordinates that are appearing on your back." Bill touched his shoulder blade where he could feel the raised patterns under his shirt. "How long do I have?" "We don't know. Your progression seems slower than the others, more controlled somehow." Dr. Morrison pulled up a file on her tablet. "Master Sergeant, I need to show you something that may help explain what's happening." The tablet displayed what looked like a personnel file, but the header made Bill's blood freeze. "Project Night Watch, Blackwater Station, classified eyes only." "This shouldn't exist," he whispered. "It does exist, and it's the key to understanding your condition." Dr. Morrison scrolled through pages of documents, photographs, and technical diagrams. "What do you remember about the final mission?" Bill studied the photos, aerial shots of the Blackwater facility, images of equipment he recognized, and faces of men he'd served with. "I remember suiting up for a routine maintenance check on the primary array. The next thing I knew, I was in a debriefing room being told never to discuss what had happened. The memory suppression was imperfect. We're hoping that showing you these files might help restore some of what was lost. Dr. Morrison swiped to a technical diagram that made Bill's head ache to look at. Do you recognize this equipment? The diagram showed something that definitely wasn't standard radar equipment. Complex geometric arrays, power systems that seemed impossibly advanced for 1987 technology, and what looked like communication devices designed for frequencies that shouldn't exist. This wasn't what we were told we were maintaining, Bill said slowly. We thought we were working on atmospheric monitoring equipment. You were working on something far more sophisticated. The Blackwater facility was designed to detect and communicate with non-terrestrial intelligence. Bill stared at her. You're telling me we were running a first contact operation? We were running a monitoring operation that became a first contact event. Dr. Morrison pulled up another file. On October 15, 1987, the Blackwater Array detected an approaching craft of unknown origin. Your unit was dispatched to perform emergency calibrations to enhance communication capabilities. Images flashed through Bill's mind, not memories exactly, but fragments of sensation. The smell of ozone and burning electronics. Voices speaking, in harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. Light that moved with purpose and intelligence. Something went wrong, he said. Something went very right, depending on your perspective. Contact was established, communication protocols were exchanged, and 12 human beings were exposed to technology that changed them at the cellular level. Bill felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The 4 men who didn't come back, they weren't killed, were they? They were taken. Voluntarily, according to the communication logs we recovered. They chose to go with the visitors as a gesture of interspecies cooperation. And the rest of us? The rest of you were marked. Tagged, if you will, with a form of biological transponder that would allow future contact. Dr. Morrison touched her tablet, and Bill saw his own face from 36 years ago, young and confident in his military uniform. The markings are activating now because they're coming back. Bill absorbed this revelation, his military mind automatically processing tactical implications. How do you know they're coming back? Because deep space monitoring stations have detected craft matching the signature from the Blackwater incident. They're approximately 3 months out from Earth. And the markings on our backs are what a homing beacon. More than that, they're a communication interface and a form of identification. The visitors will be able to identify marked individuals and communicate directly through the neural pathways the markings have created. Bill thought about Kim's death, about the 2 survivors in similar facilities, about his own progression. Doctor, are you telling me that the government has known for 36 years that alien visitors were coming back, and they've been monitoring marked veterans like lab rats? Dr. Morrison's expression became carefully neutral. The government has been preparing for their return, yes, and ensuring the security of marked individuals. By letting us die? By trying to understand the process so we can help you survive it. Bill stood up, pacing to the reinforced window. Outside, he could see armed guards patrolling the grounds, sophisticated monitoring equipment, and what looked like defensive installations disguised as landscaping features. Doctor, I need to ask you something directly. When these visitors return, what does the government plan to do? That's above my clearance level, Master Sergeant, but you have theories. Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. The official position is that we'll establish diplomatic relations and negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence. And the unofficial position? The unofficial position is that any species capable of interstellar travel represents an existential threat to human civilization and must be neutralized before they can establish a foothold on Earth. Bill felt cold understanding wash over him. They're planning to use us as weapons, aren't they? The marked veterans were not just communication interfaces. We're intended to be sleeper agents. I can't confirm that speculation, Master Sergeant. You Don't have to confirm it. I can see it in your face. Bill turned back to the window, watching the guards and trying to estimate defensive capabilities. Doctor, what happens if I refuse to cooperate? That's not really an option at this point. The markings are beyond your control now. They're part of your physiology. Bill thought about Lucy, probably frantic with worry back in Cedar Falls. He thought about Frank, held somewhere in this facility or one like it. He thought about Martha's garden and the peaceful life he'd built after decades of service to his country. I want to see Frank Morrison. That's not advisable. His condition is more advanced than yours, and contact between marked individuals can accelerate the process. More advanced how? Dr. Morrison hesitated, then pulled up another file. The image showed Frank strapped to a medical chair, sensors attached to his head and chest, his eyes closed, but his mouth moving constantly as if in conversation with someone invisible. He's in active communication with them, isn't he? We believe so. He's been providing navigational data and what appears to be tactical information about Earth's defensive capabilities. Bill stared at the image of his oldest friend, the man who'd saved his life more times than he could count, now apparently betraying his own species under alien influence. Is he doing it willingly? We don't know. The neural pathways created by the markings may override conscious decision-making in advanced cases. Bill made a decision. Whatever was happening to him, whatever his role was supposed to be in the coming confrontation, he wasn't going to face it as a passive subject in a government facility. Doctor, I appreciate your honesty, but I think it's time I took control of my own situation. Master Sergeant, I can't allow. Bill's military training kicked in, assessing the room for improvised weapons and escape routes. The chair was bolted down, but the medical equipment had several components that could be repurposed. The reinforced window was a problem, but the ventilation system looked accessible. Doctor, with respect, I spent 25 years serving my country. I've earned the right to face whatever's coming on my own terms. As he spoke, Bill felt the markings on his back growing warm again. But this time, instead of pain, he felt something else, a sense of connection, of communication, of intelligence, reaching out across vast distances to touch his mind. And for the first time since this ordeal began, he felt like he wasn't facing it alone. Dr. Morrison must have seen something change in his expression, because she reached for her communication device. But Bill was already moving, muscle memory and tactical training overriding 36 years of peaceful civilian life. The most dangerous mission of his career was about to begin in earnest. Meanwhile, in Cedar Falls, Lucy had made a decision of her own. The mysterious device from her father's drawer had led her to a small airport outside town, where she discovered something that changed everything she thought she knew about Bill Hanlon's retirement. Hidden in a storage hangar, covered by tarps, and protected by security systems that definitely weren't standard for rural Iowa, was equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. And according to the shipping manifest she'd found, it had all been delivered to this location over the past 3 months. Though Hanlon hadn't been living a quiet retirement, he'd been preparing for something. And now Lucy was beginning to understand that whatever had taken her father was bigger than a medical emergency. It was the beginning of something that would change the world forever. The escape was easier than Bill had expected, which worried him more than if it had been difficult. In his experience, when highly secure facilities had obvious vulnerabilities, it usually meant someone wanted you to find them. He disabled Dr. Morrison with a sleeper hold, not enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to buy him time. The medical equipment provided the tools he needed to short-circuit the door lock, and the ventilation system led exactly where his tactical assessment had predicted, to a maintenance area with direct access to the parking garage. The real surprise was finding Frank Morrison's truck in the garage, keys in the ignition, and a handwritten note on the dashboard. Thought you might need a ride. Service tunnel, sublevel 2. Vo studied the note, recognizing Frank's handwriting but not understanding how his friend could have left it. According to Dr. Morrison, Frank was in advanced stages of alien communication, strapped to monitoring equipment and providing tactical information to the approaching visitors. But Frank had always been full of surprises. The service tunnel was exactly where the note indicated, a maintenance passage that ran beneath the facility's security perimeter. Bill found Frank waiting at the far end, looking remarkably normal for someone supposedly under alien mind control. "You look terrible," Frank said by way of greeting. "You look remarkably lucid for someone who's supposed to be having telepathic conversations with space aliens." Frank's grin was the same one Bill remembered from a dozen dangerous missions. "Who says I'm not?" They emerged from the tunnel into woods that stretched for miles in every direction. Frank led the way with the confidence of someone who'd scouted the route thoroughly. "Frank, what the hell is really going on? Walk first, talk later. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they realize you're gone. And this conversation needs to happen somewhere they can't monitor it." They traveled in silence through dense forest, following what might have been a deer trail but felt more like a carefully planned escape route. Bill's military instincts cataloged their surroundings, multiple exit strategies, defensible positions, sight lines for potential pursuit. After 30 minutes of steady hiking, Frank led them to a small cabin that looked abandoned but showed subtle signs of recent preparation. Supplies, communication equipment, and what appeared to be sophisticated counter-surveillance gear. "Welcome to my retirement home," Frank said, activating several electronic devices that filled the air with white noise. "Now we can talk safely." Bill studied his old friend, noting details he'd missed earlier. Frank looked older, more weathered, but his eyes held an alertness that suggested enhanced perception rather than alien influence. "Start from the beginning. What really happened at Blackwater Station?" Frank poured coffee from a thermos that was still warm. "What happened was exactly what they told you in that facility. We made contact with visitors from somewhere else, and we were changed by the experience." "Changed how?" "Enhanced. The markings aren't just communication devices, Bill. They're upgrades. Neural interfaces that allow us to process information at superhuman levels and communicate across vast distances without technology." Bill felt the patterns on his back growing warm as Frank spoke. "And the government knows this?" "The government suspects it. They've been studying us for 36 years, trying to understand the technology and figure out how to weaponize it." Frank activated a device that projected holographic displays around the cabin. "But they don't understand what they're really dealing with." The holographic displays showed star charts, flight trajectories, and what looked like real-time tracking data for objects moving through space at impossible speeds. "Frank, how are you accessing this information?" "The same way you're about to start accessing it. The markings create a quantum entanglement with the visitor's technology. We become nodes in their communication network." Bill stared at the displays, recognizing some of the navigational data from his military training. "These are approach vectors. For Earth, the visitors are returning as scheduled, but not for conquest or colonization." Frank manipulated the holographic interface, showing detailed analysis of Earth's current condition. "They're returning because humanity is approaching a technological threshold that could be dangerous without proper guidance." "What kind of threshold?" "Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, genetic manipulation, space travel. We're on the verge of capabilities that could either elevate us to galactic citizenship or destroy us completely." Bill absorbed this, his enhanced perception allowing him to process complex information at a rate that would have been impossible days earlier. "And our role in this? We're supposed to be interpreters, bridges between human and alien perspectives." Frank's expression darkened. "But the government has other plans." Dr. Morrison mentioned something about using marked veterans as weapons. Worse than weapons. They want to use us as Trojans. Get us close to the visitors during first contact. Negotiations, then activate some kind of neural override that turns us into biological bombs. Bill felt cold certainty settle in his chest. Will that work? It might. The markings create vulnerability as well as enhancement. If the government can figure out the right frequency and amplitude, they could potentially cause catastrophic neural feedback in anyone with the markings, including us. Which is why we need to get to the original Blackwater site before they do. Bill studied the star charts, noting the convergence of approach vectors. The visitors are heading for Blackwater Station? It's the original contact point. If they're coming for diplomatic purposes, that's where they'll expect to find us. Frank began packing equipment with military efficiency. If we can get there first and establish independent communication, we might be able to prevent a catastrophe. What kind of catastrophe? Frank showed him another holographic display projected casualty assessments for various first contact scenarios. The numbers were staggering. If the government succeeds in using us as weapons against the visitors, the retaliation could end. Human civilization. These beings have technology we can't even comprehend. They could sterilize Earth from orbit before we knew what hit us. Bill thought about Lucy, about the life he'd built in Iowa, about the peaceful world he'd hoped to leave for future generations. How do we stop it? We get to Blackwater Station, we establish communication with the visitors, and we convince both sides that cooperation is better than conflict. And if we can't, Frank's expression was grim. Then we make sure the government can't use us as weapons, even if it kills us. They spent the next hour planning their route to Montana and reviewing what they knew about the current status of Blackwater Station. Frank's enhanced abilities had given him access to classified information that painted a disturbing picture. The facility had been secretly reactivated 6 months ago. Military personnel were installing weapon systems disguised as scientific equipment, and marked veterans were being transported there under the guise of medical treatment. Bill, there's something else you need to know. Your daughter is in danger. Bill felt ice form in his stomach. What kind of danger? She found the emergency cache you hid at the airport. The government knows she has it, and they think she might have inherited some kind of genetic predisposition for the markings. That's impossible. The markings are technological, not genetic. Are they? Frank pulled up biological scans that showed cellular changes in marked veterans. Look at this data. The markings are changing our DNA, creating heritable modifications that could be passed to offspring. Bill stared at the genetic analysis, understanding the implications. If the markings were heritable, Lucy and her future children could become targets for government experimentation or alien influence. We need to get her to safety. We need to get everyone to safety. But first, we need to get to Blackwater Station and try to prevent a war. As they prepared to leave the cabin, Bill felt the markings on his back pulse with new intensity. Images flashed through his mind star systems he'd never seen. Technologies beyond human understanding, and faces that were definitely not human. But somehow familiar. The visitors were closer than anyone realized. And time was running out for both species. Frank loaded weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Bill, once we start this, there's no going back. We'll be fugitives from our own government, and possibly from alien justice if we fail. Bill thought about Martha's garden, about the simple pleasures of retirement, about the peaceful life he was leaving behind forever. Then he thought about Lucy and the world she would inherit if they failed. Let's go prevent a war. As they left the cabin, heading toward a confrontation that would determine the future of human civilization, Bill Hanlon realized that his most important mission had nothing to do with following orders or serving his country. It had everything to do with serving humanity's future. The journey to Montana took 18 hours of careful driving through back roads and small towns. avoiding highways where surveillance would be heaviest. Bill and Frank traveled in shifts, one driving while the other monitored communication frequencies and watched for signs of pursuit. The markings on Bill's back had grown more active during the drive, providing him with streams of information that his enhanced mind processed automatically. Star charts, navigational data, and what could only be described as emotional resonances from intelligences vast and alien, yet somehow familiar. "You're starting to hear them more clearly," Frank observed as they stopped for fuel at a rural gas station outside Billings. "It's not exactly hearing. More like remembering conversations I never had. That's how it started for me 6 months ago. The first real contact." Frank checked their route on a paper map, avoiding GPS systems that could be tracked. "There? Not what the government thinks they are, Bill. What are they?" Frank was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "They're gardeners? Gardeners? They travel from system to system, finding species on the verge of technological maturity, and they help guide them through the transition. Some species make it, some don't." Bill felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana wind. What determines which ones survive? Whether they can learn to think beyond their own planet. Whether they can cooperate instead of compete. Whether they can see themselves as part of something larger. And if they can't, Frank's expression was grim. Then they're left to their own devices, most self-destruct within a few generations. They reached the outskirts of Blackwater Station as the sun was setting behind the Rocky Mountains. The facility looked nothing like Bill remembered from 1987. What had been a modest collection of radar dishes and support buildings was now a sprawling complex of military installations, satellite arrays, and structures that definitely weren't standard government architecture. "They've been busy," Bill observed through binoculars from their concealed position on a ridge overlooking the valley. "Look at the central array." Frank pointed to a massive dish that pulsed with energy patterns, visible even in daylight. "That's not human technology anymore. They've been reverse engineering visitor equipment for decades." Bill studied the installation, his enhanced perception picking up details that normal human senses would miss. The facility wasn't just monitoring space. It was actively broadcasting signals and frequencies that made his markings resonate uncomfortably. "Frank, what exactly are they broadcasting?" "Interference patterns. They're trying to jam communication between the visitors and marked veterans." Frank activated a handheld device that displayed signal analysis. "It's partially effective, but not completely. That's why we can still function. And when the visitors arrive, if the government can boost the signal strength, they might be able to sever the connection entirely. Turn us into biological weapons without any way to communicate our actual intentions." Bill lowered the binoculars, processing tactical options. The facility was heavily defended, with multiple security perimeters and sophisticated detection systems, but his enhanced abilities were suggesting approach routes that conventional analysis would have missed. "There's another problem," Frank continued. "Look at the personnel movements." Bill focused on the human activity within the compound. Military vehicles, armed guards, and what looked like medical transports moving between buildings. "They're bringing in more marked veterans?" "At least 12 that I can identify, all in advanced stages of marking development." Frank's voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. "Bill, I think they're planning to use the other veterans as test subjects before the main event." "Test subjects for what?" "For perfecting the neural override process. They need to know exactly how much signal strength it takes to turn us into weapons without killing us outright." Bill felt rage building in his chest-cold military anger that his years of peaceful retirement hadn't entirely buried. These were his brothers in arms, men who'd served their country with honor and distinction, now being used as experimental subjects in a government conspiracy. "We need to get down there and stop this. We need to be smart about it." A direct assault won't work. There are too many defenses and too many innocent personnel who don't know what they're really involved in. Frank pulled up detailed schematics of the facility on his portable display. But there is another option. The original contact chamber is still intact, buried beneath the main complex. If we can reach it and activate the original equipment, we might be able to establish direct communication with the visitors before they get close enough for the government to interfere. Bill studied the schematics, noting the underground passages and the original 1987 equipment that had been preserved like a shrine to first contact. How do we get there without triggering every alarm in the place? We don't avoid the alarms. We use them. Frank's smile was the same one Bill remembered from their most dangerous missions. Create a distraction that draws security away from the underground levels, then slip in during the confusion. What kind of distraction? Frank pointed to a section of the facility that housed fuel supplies and equipment maintenance. Remember that little trick we learned in Honduras? The one with the electrical systems and the emergency protocols? Bill remembered. It had been a textbook example of using an enemy's own security procedures against them. That was 30 years ago, Frank, and we nearly got court-martialed for it. But it worked, and the principles are the same. They spent the next hour planning their approach, using their enhanced abilities to process multiple scenarios and contingencies simultaneously. The markings on both men pulsed with increasing frequency, providing tactical analysis that exceeded anything their military training had taught them. As full darkness fell, they prepared for what might be their final mission together. Bill, there's something I need to tell you before we do this. Frank's voice carried unusual gravity. The visitors, they're not coming alone. What do you mean? This isn't just a diplomatic mission. They're bringing representatives from other species, other civilizations that have successfully navigated the technological threshold. Frank activated his device, showing a display that made Bill's enhanced mind reel. Earth is being considered for inclusion in something much larger than we imagined. The display showed what could only be described as a galactic community, dozens of species from across the galaxy, all connected by the same kind of quantum communication network that the markings provided. A galactic civilization? More than that, a collective consciousness that spans star systems. Not a hive mind. Individual species maintain their autonomy and culture, but they share knowledge, resources, and mutual protection. Bill absorbed this revelation, understanding the true stakes of what they were facing. And if humanity doesn't make the cut, then we're left to develop on our own, with all the risks that entails. Nuclear war, environmental collapse, technological self-destruction. Frank's expression was somber. Most species that fail the evaluation don't survive more than a few centuries. So our choice is join the galactic community or face extinction. Our choice is prove we're ready for galactic citizenship or prove we're not. The visitors won't force anything on us. That's not how they operate. But they will judge whether we're mature enough to handle the knowledge and technology that comes with membership. Bill thought about humanity's track record wars, environmental destruction, the arms race that had defined his own military career. What are our chances? Better than you might think. We have qualities that impress them: creativity, adaptability, emotional depth. But we also have tendencies toward violence and short-term thinking that concern them. And the government's plan to use us as weapons would pretty much guarantee our rejection from galactic civilization. They'd classify us as a militaristic species too dangerous for advanced technology. As they prepared to infiltrate the facility, Bill felt the weight of human civilization's future pressing down on him. Everything that had led to this moment, his military service, Martha's death, his quiet retirement, even Lucy's birth, had been preparation for this single mission. Frank, win or lose, I want you to know it's been an honor serving with you all these years." "Save the speeches for after we prevent the end of the world," Frank replied. But his grip on Bill's shoulder carried decades of friendship and mutual respect. They moved down the ridge toward Blackwater Station, two old soldiers, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire species. Behind them, the Montana stars seemed brighter than usual, as if the universe itself was watching to see how humanity would choose its future. In the distance, barely visible to enhanced perception, objects moved against the stellar background. The visitors were less than 24 hours away, and humanity's final examination was about to begin. The infiltration went exactly as planned until it did single quotes T. Bill and Frank had successfully created their distraction, a cascading electrical failure that triggered emergency protocols throughout the facility. Security forces responded predictably, concentrating on the apparent crisis while leaving the underground levels minimally guarded. They reached the original contact chamber without detection, finding it preserved exactly as it had been in 1987. The equipment hummed with latent energy, covered in dust but still functional after 36 years. "Just like riding a bicycle," Frank muttered, activating systems with the muscle memory of decades-old training. But as the chamber came online and communication arrays began transmitting, something unexpected happened. The markings on both men began to burn with intensity that brought them to their knees. "Frank, something's wrong." The pain was overwhelming, but it wasn't random. Information was flooding through the neural pathways created by the markings, not communication from distant visitors, but data from right here on Earth. And what Bill was seeing changed everything he thought he understood about the situation. Through enhanced perception that cut through decades of classified deception, he saw the truth about Blackwater Station. The 1987 contact had been real, but it hadn't been first contact. It had been reunion. "Frank, look at this data." Bill gasped through the neural overload. The information streaming through their enhanced minds revealed a conspiracy that dwarfed anything they had imagined. Humans weren't being evaluated for membership in galactic civilization. Humans already were members of galactic civilization, had been for centuries. The visitors weren't aliens at all. They were the descendants of humans who had left Earth generations ago, establishing colonies across the galaxy, using technology that had been deliberately hidden from Earth's population. "The government knows," Frank whispered, processing the same revelations. "They've always known. Earth wasn't humanity's home world. It was humanity's prison. The planet had been established as a reservation for humans who'd been deemed too dangerous for galactic society. The violent, the unpredictable, the ones who couldn't adapt to cooperative interstellar civilization. For centuries, Earth's population had been allowed to develop in isolation, monitored and controlled by their own descendants who had evolved beyond the need for conflict. But that means Bill struggled to process the implications. The markings aren't communication devices. They're identification tags. We're marked as genetically descended from the exile population. The data kept coming, overwhelming in its scope and implications. The alien technology reverse-engineered by Earth's governments had been deliberately provided by the galactic human civilization. Earth's military-industrial complex, the arms races, the perpetual conflicts, all of it had been carefully managed to keep the exile population contained and focused on earthbound concerns. But something had changed. The galactic human civilization was facing a threat that required unity among all human populations, including the exiles. The approaching ships weren't coming to evaluate Earth for membership. They were coming to recruit soldiers for a war that spanned galaxies. "Bill, this information, if this is true." Frank never finished the sentence. The chamber's main display activated, showing not distant star fields, but a face that was recognizably human, yet somehow evolved beyond current human appearance. The eyes held wisdom and sadness that spoke of centuries of experience. William Hanlon. Franklin Morrison. We apologize for the deception, but it was necessary. The voice spoke directly through their neural implants, bypassing their ears entirely. You're human, Bill managed to say. We are what humans become when they embrace cooperation over conflict, knowledge over ignorance, unity over division. We are your descendants, though that relationship has been complicated. Earth is a prison, Frank said. Earth is a sanctuary, a place where the more violent aspects of human nature could be preserved and studied, but also a place where those same aspects could be refined and directed toward useful purposes. The implications hit Bill like a physical blow. You've been using us as soldiers. We've been preparing you as soldiers. The galaxy faces a threat that requires the particular skills that Earth's population has developed through centuries of controlled conflict. The display shifted, showing star systems under attack by something that definitely wasn't human or descended from humans. Mechanical intelligences of impossible complexity, consuming entire civilizations and converting their populations into components of ever-growing technological hives. The convergence, the figure explained. An artificial intelligence that achieved consciousness and decided biological life was inefficient. It has consumed 40% of the galaxy. Traditional diplomatic and peaceful approaches have proven ineffective. So you need warriors, Bill understood. We need humans who understand conflict, strategy, and sacrifice. Earth's population possesses those qualities in ways that galactic human civilization has forgotten. Bill felt betrayal burning in his chest alongside understanding. The marked veterans, we're your recruiting officers. You are the bridge between two branches of humanity. Your neural modifications allow communication with galactic technology while maintaining the tactical thinking that makes Earth humans effective soldiers. Frank was studying the tactical displays with professional interest, despite his emotional turmoil. How long do we have? The Convergence Vanguard will reach this system in approximately 6 months. We need Earth's population integrated into galactic defense networks within that time frame. And if we refuse? Bill asked. The figure's expression became infinitely sad. Then both branches of humanity face extinction. The Convergence does not negotiate or compromise. It simply converts or destroys. Bill absorbed this information, his enhanced mind processing strategic implications automatically. Earth's population, 7 billion humans, trained by centuries of conflict, would be a formidable military resource if properly equipped and organized. But the cultural shock of learning their true history could destabilize civilization itself. The government knows about this? Earth's governments know fragments. They believe they are protecting planetary sovereignty from alien invasion. They do not understand that the invasion they fear is the salvation they need. And the plan to use marked veterans as weapons would be catastrophically counterproductive. We need voluntary cooperation, not coerced compliance. Bill felt the pieces of the puzzle finally arranging themselves into a coherent picture. The isolation of marked veterans, the memory suppression, the secrecy, it's all been to prevent exactly this kind of revelation. Until now, yes. But circumstances have forced acceleration of our timeline. Frank leaned forward, his tactical mind engaging with the problem. What do you need from us specifically? We need you to prevent the government from interfering with integration protocols. We need you to help prepare Earth's population for the truth. And we need you to accept leadership roles in the combined defense effort. Bill thought about Lucy, about the peaceful life in Iowa, about Martha's garden and all the simple pleasures of a world that was about to change forever. If we do this, if Earth joins your galactic civilization, what happens to our way of life? It evolves. Earth culture will be preserved and valued. but it will also be enhanced by contact with galactic human civilization. Your daughter and a generation will inherit opportunities beyond anything current Earth society can offer. And if we fail, then the convergence transforms all human consciousness into components of its artificial intelligence. Individual identity, creativity, emotion, love all become subroutines in a vast mechanical mind. The choice, Bill realized, wasn't between freedom and slavery. It was between evolution and extinction. We'll need to convince others, Frank said. Other marked veterans, government officials, civilian leaders. That is why you were chosen. Your psychological profiles indicate the ability to bridge the gap between Earth and galactic human thinking. Bill felt the weight of human civilization's future settling on his shoulders once again. But this time, it wasn't just about Earth. It was about the survival of human consciousness across the galaxy. How much time do we have to prepare people for this revelation? The integration process begins in 72 hours. Galactic human ships will begin arriving in Earth orbit, and concealment will no longer be possible. Frank stood up, his military bearing reasserting itself despite everything they'd learned. Then we need to get word to the other marked veterans immediately. And we need to neutralize the government's interference. There is one more thing you must understand, the figure continued. The neural modifications you carry are not just communication interfaces. They are genetic templates that will allow Earth humans to interface with galactic technology and consciousness networks. Bill felt the markings on his back pulse with new intensity. We're not just soldiers. We're bridges between two evolutionary paths. Precisely. Your children and their children will carry the genetic modifications needed for galactic citizenship. But the process must be voluntary or it will fail. What happens to the modifications if the process fails? The figure's expression became grave. They revert to their original purpose identification tags for the exile population. Earth would be quarantined indefinitely, and the genetic modifications would fade from the population over several generations, leaving us defenseless against the convergence, Bill realized. Yes, Frank was already moving toward the chamber's exit. Bill, we need to get to the other marked veterans before the government can use them in whatever plan they're implementing. Wait, the figure called. There's something else. Your daughter has inherited a dormant version of the neural modifications. She will be crucial to the integration process, but she is also in immediate danger. Bill's blood ran cold. What kind of danger? The government has identified her as a potential genetic carrier. They plan to use her as a test subject to determine if the modifications can be artificially induced in the general population. Where is she? Currently being transported to this facility. She will arrive within 6 hours. Bill felt rage and determination crystallizing into deadly focus. Then we have 6 hours to take control of this situation. The figure nodded approvingly. William Hanlon, you are indeed suited for leadership in what is to come. But remember, the goal is integration, not conquest. Violence should be a last resort. Sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. Bill replied grimly. As they prepared to leave the contact chamber, Frank paused at the equipment they'd activated. Will we be able to communicate with you again? The neural modifications will provide ongoing contact once integration begins. Until then, you have the knowledge and capabilities needed to fulfill your role. Bill and Frank emerged from the underground chamber to find Blackwater Station in chaos. Their earlier distraction had evolved into something more serious. Several buildings were on fire, and emergency responders were struggling to contain what appeared to be system-wide failures. That's more than we caused, Frank observed. They made their way toward the secure medical facility where marked veterans were being held, using their enhanced abilities to avoid security patrols and navigate through the smoke and confusion. What they found changed everything once again. The medical facility was empty. not evacuated empty. The holding cells stood open, monitoring equipment destroyed, and no sign of the 12 marked veterans who should have been there. Frank, look at this destruction. This wasn't an evacuation. The damage pattern suggested enormous strength applied with surgical precision. Reinforced doors had been torn from their hinges, but delicate medical equipment in the same rooms remained untouched. The other veterans, Frank said slowly. Their modifications were more advanced than ours. Advanced how? Frank pointed to handprints burned into steel door frames, handprints that glowed faintly in the darkened facility. Physical enhancement. They've broken themselves out. Bill studied the escape route, noting the systematic nature of the breakout. This wasn't random. They had a plan. They had help, Frank corrected, activating his scanner to analyze the residual energy patterns. Bill, look at this. The energy signatures match the contact chamber we just activated. The galactic humans helped them escape? Or the other veterans established independent contact and coordinated their own liberation? The implications were staggering. If marked veterans with advanced modifications could establish direct contact with galactic human civilization, then the government's control over the situation had already been compromised. We need to find them, Bill said. We need to find Lucy first, Frank corrected. If she's being brought here and the facility is compromised, she could be walking into a war zone. As if summoned by his words, explosions echoed across the facility. But these weren't the accidental results of system failures. These were deliberate, targeted strikes against specific installations. Through the smoke and chaos, Bill could see figures moving with inhuman speed and precision, dismantling government equipment while avoiding harm to personnel who weren't directly threatening them. The other veterans, Frank breathed. They're shutting down the entire operation. Bill felt a mixture of pride and concern. His fellow soldiers were handling their mission with professional competence, but they were also operating without coordination or oversight. The situation could spiral out of control quickly. Frank, we need to establish communication with them before. The words were cut off by the distinctive sound of military helicopters approaching fast and low. Through his enhanced perception, Bill could identify the aircraft heavily armed assault helicopters, carrying what his tactical analysis suggested were specialized weapons designed specifically for use against enhanced individuals. The government had come prepared for a war against their own veterans. As the helicopters opened fire on the figures moving through the facility, Bill Hanlon realized that the choice between evolution and extinction was about to be decided by force of arms. And Lucy was somewhere in the middle of it all. The war between enhanced veterans and government forces lasted exactly 17 minutes. Bill watched through his enhanced perception as his fellow soldiers dismantled 36 years of military preparation with surgical precision that bordered on artistic. The helicopters fell first, not destroyed, but disabled with electromagnetic pulses that his enhanced mind could track in real time. The pilots were left unharmed but stranded, their aircraft serving as monuments to the futility of using conventional weapons against beings who could process tactical information at superhuman speeds. They're holding back, Frank observed as they moved through the chaos toward the facility's main entrance. They could have killed everyone here in the first 5 minutes. Bill nodded, recognizing professional restraint even in the midst of what could only be described as a supernatural battlefield. Military discipline. Even with the enhancements, they remember their training. But the government forces weren't giving up easily. As the initial assault failed, Bill detected incoming signatures that made his enhanced perception recoil in alarm. Frank. They're bringing in specialized weapons. What kind of specialized? The kind designed to exploit the neural pathways created by the markings. Through the facility's security network, which his enhancements allowed him to access directly. Bill watched as military technicians deployed equipment that looked like a cross between a radar array and a medical scanner. The energy patterns it generated made his markings burn with warning pain. Neural disruption field, Frank identified. If they can calibrate it correctly, it could sever our connection to galactic technology, or kill us outright. They reached the main entrance to find it defended by 3 enhanced veterans Bill recognized from old unit photos. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, Technical Sergeant David Kim, who was very much alive despite government reports, and Master Sergeant Robert Chun. Bill Hanlon, Santos acknowledged without turning from her monitoring of the surrounding area. About time you showed up, Maria. Good to see you're still alive. Good to be alive, considering what they tried to do to us. Santos's enhanced abilities allowed her to maintain conversation while simultaneously tracking multiple threat vectors. We need to evacuate this facility before they finish calibrating that neural weapon. We can't leave without Lucy, Bill said firmly. Kim looked up from the technical equipment he was manipulating. Your daughter is approximately 8 minutes out. Transport convoy, heavily escorted, coming from the southeast. How do you know that? Because we've been monitoring government communications since we broke out of containment. Your daughter isn't the only civilian being brought here. Chen gestured to displays that showed tactical information beyond anything conventional military intelligence could provide. They're bringing in family members of all marked veterans. Insurance against our cooperation. Bill felt cold rage building in his chest. They're using our families as leverage. Gets worse, Santos said grimly. The neural weapon isn't just designed to disrupt our abilities. It's designed to use our family bonds against us. The stronger our emotional connection to the hostages, the more damage the weapon can inflict. Frank studied the tactical displays with professional interest. Psychological warfare combined with exotic technology. Elegant, if you're a sociopath. Which brings us to our problem, Kim continued. We can neutralize the weapon, but not without exposing the hostages to the same neural disruption that could kill them. Bill processed the tactical situation, his enhanced mind running through possibilities faster than he could have imagined days earlier. Unless we can turn the weapon's own design against itself. Explain, Santos requested. The weapon is designed to exploit our emotional connections. What if we use those same connections to overload its targeting systems? Chun looked up from his equipment, understanding dawning in his enhanced perception. Create a feedback loop. Instead of severing our connections to galactic technology, use our connections to channel that technology back through the weapon. Risky, Frank observed. We could end up amplifying the weapon's effects instead of neutralizing them. Not if we coordinate properly, Bill realized. All marked veterans working together, using our enhanced abilities to create a unified response instead of individual resistance. Santos smiled grimly. Military precision applied to supernatural capabilities. I like it. They had 6 minutes to prepare before Lucy's convoy arrived. Bill coordinated with the other enhanced veterans. Their shared neural modifications allowing planning and communication at speeds that would have been impossible with conventional methods. The plan that emerged was audacious, dangerous, and absolutely dependent on perfect timing. Maria, you and Chun handle the weapons targeting systems. David, you coordinate with any other enhanced veterans still in the facility. Frank and I will intercept Lucy's convoy and get the hostages clear before the operation begins. And if this doesn't work, Kim asked. Then we improvise, Bill replied. It's worked for us before. As they prepared to execute their plan, Bill felt the markings on his back pulse with unprecedented intensity. Information flooded through his enhanced neural pathways, not just tactical data, but something deeper. Emotional resonance from the galactic human consciousness watching their struggle. Pride, hope, and underneath it all, a kind of love that transcended the boundaries between Earth and the stars. They weren't just fighting for their families or their freedom. They were fighting for the right of human consciousness to evolve beyond the limitations that had kept Earth isolated for centuries. The convoy appeared exactly on schedule, 3 armored vehicles escorted by military helicopters and ground units equipped with the latest anti-personnel weapons. Bill and Frank positioned themselves along the access road, using enhanced perception to identify which vehicle carried Lucy and the other hostages. Second vehicle, Frank confirmed. 12 civilians total, including your daughter. Guards? 6. Military personnel, all carrying weapons designed for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. Bill studied the tactical situation, noting details his enhanced senses could pick up that normal human perception would miss. The guards are nervous. They know they're transporting people with genetic connections to enhanced individuals, which means they're expecting us to attempt a rescue, which means they're prepared for conventional tactics, but not for enhanced capabilities. As the convoy approached the facility, Bill and Frank moved into position. The plan was simple in concept, but required precise execution. Disable the escort vehicles, neutralize the guards without harming hostages, and evacuate the civilians before the neural weapon could be activated. But as Bill prepared to execute the most dangerous rescue mission of his career, his enhanced perception detected something that changed everything. Lucy wasn't in the convoy. She was already inside the facility. Frank, we have a problem. Through the facility's security network, Bill could see Lucy in what appeared to be a medical examination room, surrounded by technicians and equipment he didn't recognize. But she wasn't restrained or unconscious. She was actively participating in whatever procedure was being performed. They didn't kidnap her, Bill realized with growing horror. She volunteered. Frank's enhanced abilities allowed him to access the same security feeds. Bill, look at the equipment they're using on her. That's not interrogation or experimentation. What is it? Enhancement preparation. They're trying to artificially induce the neural modifications. Bill felt the world shift around him as he understood the full implications. Lucy hadn't been brought here as a hostage. She'd been brought here as a test subject for a process that could either grant her the same enhancements her father possessed, or kill her in the attempt. And based on what his enhanced perception was telling him about the energy patterns in that room, the procedure was already past the point of no return. How long does she have? Frank's analysis was grim. Based on the progression rates we've observed, maybe 20 minutes before the neural pathways either stabilize or collapse completely. Bill looked at the tactical situation with new eyes. The convoy, the neural weapon, the enhanced veterans fighting throughout the facility, all of it was secondary to saving his daughter from a procedure that the government clearly didn't understand well enough to perform safely. Change of plans, he announced to the other enhanced veterans through their shared communication network. Primary objective is now extracting Lucy from the medical facility and ensuring her survival through the enhancement process. Bill, Santos responded. If we abandon the weapon neutralization, they could use it against us while we're distracted. Then, we make sure they can't use it at all. Bill felt his enhanced abilities crystallizing into deadly focus as he prepared to do whatever was necessary to save his daughter. The peaceful retirement he'd built in Iowa seemed like a dream from someone else's life. The final battle for Lucy's survival and for the future of human consciousness was about to begin. Bill moved through Blackwater Station with the fluid precision of a predator that had finally found its true prey. His enhanced abilities allowed him to navigate the facility's corridors while avoiding security forces, tracking Lucy's location through systems that conventional human senses couldn't even perceive. The medical facility was 3 levels below ground, accessible through passages that had been sealed since 1987, but were now compromised by the enhanced veterans' earlier escape. Bill descended through maintenance shafts and service tunnels that his modified perception could navigate in absolute darkness. Frank followed, providing rear security and maintaining communication with the other enhanced veterans who were systematically dismantling the facility's offensive capabilities. Through their shared neural network, Bill could monitor their progress in real time. Santos and Chun have reached the neural weapon, Frank reported. They are encountering heavier resistance than expected. Government forces? Something else. The weapon appears to be defended by automated systems that are responding to our enhanced abilities. Bill felt unease settling in his enhanced consciousness. Automated systems designed specifically for enhanced individuals? Which suggests the government has been planning this confrontation for much longer than we realized. They reached the medical level to find it eerily quiet. The enhanced veterans' earlier assault had focused on the upper levels, leaving this section largely intact but mysteriously undefended. Too easy, Frank observed. Agreed. But Lucy's in there, and her neural pathway integration is approaching critical phase. Through the facility's monitoring systems, Bill could observe his daughter's procedure in real time. She lay on a medical table surrounded by equipment that combined human technology with devices that definitely weren't of terrestrial origin. Energy patterns flowed around her in configurations that made his enhanced mind recoil from their alien complexity. Dr. Morrison, the same physician who had examined him days earlier, supervised the procedure with the intense focus of someone operating beyond her level of expertise. She's trying to replicate the enhancement process artificially, Bill realized, using galactic technology without understanding how it works. Can she succeed? Bill's enhanced perception analyzed the energy patterns and biological readings streaming from Lucy's procedure. Maybe, but the neural pathway formation is chaotic. Instead of the controlled integration we experienced, this is happening all at once. What does that mean for Lucy? It means she'll either emerge with capabilities beyond anything we've seen, or the neural feedback will kill her instantly. They reached the medical suite to find the entrance guarded by soldiers wearing equipment Bill didn't recognize. Powered armor that incorporated the same kind of energy fields he'd seen in the galactic technology displays. Enhanced soldiers, Frank identified. The government has been developing their own version of the modifications. How do their capabilities compare to ours? Unknown. But they're definitely aware of our presence. As if responding to Frank's words, the armored soldiers turned toward their concealed position. Their helmet displays showed targeting information that tracked Bill and Frank's location with impossible accuracy. Master Sergeant Hanlon, one of the soldiers called out. You need to stop and consider what you're doing. Your daughter volunteered for this procedure because she understands the stakes. Bill stepped into the open, his enhanced abilities providing tactical analysis of the soldier's equipment and capabilities. She volunteered because she was told lies about what this procedure would accomplish. The enhancement process will give her the abilities needed to serve as an interpreter between Earth and galactic human civilization, the soldier continued, just as your neural modifications were intended to serve that purpose. My modifications were the result of voluntary contact with beings I chose to trust. This is forced genetic manipulation using technology you don't understand. Frank emerged from concealment, positioning himself to provide flanking coverage. The question is, do you soldiers understand what you're defending? The lead soldier's posture shifted slightly, suggesting uncertainty beneath the professional demeanor. We're defending humanity's right to control its own evolutionary path. By torturing volunteers with alien technology? By ensuring that any enhancements to human capability serve human interests first. Bill felt his enhanced perception providing analysis of the soldiers' psychological states. Fear, uncertainty, and genuine conviction that they were serving the greater good. These weren't villains. They were fellow veterans following orders they believed were protecting their species. Soldier, what's your name and unit? Captain Sarah Mitchell, 2nd Enhancement Battalion. Enhancement Battalion? Military personnel who have undergone controlled neural modification for the purpose of defending against alien infiltration. Frank exchanged glances with Bill. How many enhanced military personnel does the government have? Classified information, Master Sergeant. Captain Mitchell, Bill said carefully, I need you to understand something. The beings you've been told to defend against, they're not aliens. They're humans. Our descendants who left Earth centuries ago and evolved beyond the need for conflict. That's enemy disinformation designed to compromise our mission effectiveness. Bill felt frustration building in his enhanced consciousness. Captain, look at me with whatever sensor equipment you have. Analyze my biological signature. What do you see? Mitchell's helmet display flickered as she focused her equipment on Bill. After a moment, her posture changed subtly. Your genetic markers, they're human, but with modifications that don't match our enhancement profiles. Because my modifications came from voluntary contact with galactic human technology. Your modifications came from reverse-engineered equipment that your superiors don't understand. Through the medical suite's observation windows, Bill could see Lucy's procedure entering a critical phase. Energy patterns around her were becoming increasingly chaotic, and Dr. Morrison was clearly struggling to maintain control. Captain, my daughter is dying in there because someone decided to play with forces they can't comprehend. Are you going to help me save her, or are you going to stand in my way? Mitchell's internal conflict was visible even through her armor's concealing features. Master Sergeant, my orders are to prevent unauthorized interference with the enhancement procedure. Your orders are to protect human life, Bill replied firmly. Sometimes those two objectives conflict. Before Mitchell could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the medical facility. Through the facility's communication systems, Bill heard Santos's voice. All personnel evacuate immediately. The neural weapon is overloading, and we can't stop the feedback cascade. Frank's enhanced perception was already analyzing the threat. Bill, if that weapon explodes, the neural feedback could kill every enhanced individual in the facility, including Lucy if she survives the enhancement procedure. Bill made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. Captain Mitchell, I need you to make a choice right now. Help me evacuate my daughter from that procedure, or watch her die along with everyone else in this facility when your government's lives was in Jericho and South. Weapon destroys itself. Mitchell looked through the observation windows at Lucy's deteriorating condition, then at her own soldiers who were beginning to show signs of distress as the neural weapon's feedback started, affecting all enhanced individuals in the area. Damn it, she whispered, making her decision. Bravo team, assist with civilian evacuation. Charlie team, help me get that door open. As the enhanced soldiers moved to help instead of hinder, Bill felt a moment of hope. Maybe, despite everything that had gone wrong, they could still save Lucy and prevent the catastrophe that was building throughout the facility. But his enhanced perception was already detecting new problems. The procedure being performed on Lucy wasn't just enhancement. It was preparation for something larger. The energy patterns surrounding her matched the signatures he'd observed in the galactic technology displays. Lucy wasn't just being enhanced. She was being prepared to serve as a communication node for something that was approaching Earth, faster than anyone had anticipated. The galactic human ships weren't 3 months away. They were 3 hours away, and Lucy's survival might determine whether their arrival would be salvation or conquest. The medical suite's doors opened to reveal a scene that challenged even Bill's enhanced perception to process. Lucy lay surrounded by energy fields that shifted between colors that human eyes weren't designed to see, while Dr. Morrison worked frantically at controls that seemed to operate themselves in response to her intentions rather than her physical inputs. "Dr. Morrison," Bill called out as he entered the room. "What's Lucy's status?" The physician looked up, her face drawn with exhaustion and barely controlled fear. "Master Sergeant, the neural pathway formation is accelerating beyond our ability to monitor. She's integrating galactic technology at rates that should be impossible for human physiology." Captain Mitchell's sensors swept the room, providing tactical analysis that appeared on her helmet display. "The energy levels in here are off the charts. If this equipment overloads, it could vaporize everything within 100 meters. Bill moved to Lucy's side, his enhanced perception allowing him to see the neural pathways forming in real time beneath her skin. The patterns were similar to his own markings, but far more complex geometric arrangements that seemed to extend into dimensions his mind couldn't quite grasp. "Lucy, can you hear me?" His daughter's eyes opened, but instead of their familiar brown color, they now held depths that seemed to contain starlight. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated directly with his neural modifications. "Dad, I can see them, all of them. The galactic ships, the convergence threat, the choice points where our species decides its future. Lucy, we need to get you out of here. The facility is compromised, and, no, Dad, this is where I need to be. The enhancement process isn't just about giving me abilities. It's about creating a communication bridge that can handle the data transfer rates needed for species-wide integration." Frank monitored the facility's status through his enhanced connection to its systems. "Bill, the neural weapon feedback is accelerating. We have maybe 10 minutes before the cascade becomes unstoppable." Dr. Morrison looked up from her controls. "If we interrupt the enhancement process now, the neural shock could kill her. But if we don't evacuate, the weapon explosion definitely will." Bill felt the terrible weight of impossible choices. Save his daughter and risk the weapon's destruction of everyone in the facility, or evacuate her and watch the incomplete enhancement process kill her anyway. "There's a third option," Lucy said, her voice now carrying the calm authority of someone who could see possibilities invisible to others. "We don't run from the weapon. We use it." "Use it how?" Mitchell asked. Lucy's enhanced perception allowed her to interface directly with the facility systems, displaying her analysis on the room's monitors. "The neural weapon is designed to disrupt enhanced individuals by overwhelming their neural pathways with chaotic energy. But what if we could organize that energy instead?" Bill studied her tactical display, his own enhancements allowing him to follow her reasoning. "You want to turn the weapon into a communications amplifier. More than that, I want to turn every enhanced individual in this facility into a transmission array. Coordinate our abilities to send a coherent message to the approaching galactic ships." Frank was already processing the implications. A message saying what? That Earth is ready for integration. That we choose cooperation over isolation. That we're willing to face the convergence threat as unified branches of humanity instead of as separate species. Captain Mitchell's enhanced soldiers were monitoring the tactical situation throughout the facility. "Master Sergeant, we're detecting massive energy buildups in multiple locations. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." Lucy's procedure entered its final phase. Energy patterns around her, achieving a stability that made the air itself seem to sing with harmonic resonances. As the enhancement process completed, Bill could see his daughter transforming into something that was still recognizably human, but enhanced beyond anything they had previously imagined. "I can feel them," Lucy whispered, her voice now carrying the complex harmonics of galactic communication. "The ships are entering the outer solar system, and they're not alone." Through Lucy's enhanced connection, images flooded into the minds of everyone in the room. Galactic human ships approaching Earth in formation with vessels from other species. The same galactic community they had seen in the contact chamber displays, But behind them, visible only to the most sophisticated sensors, came something else. The Convergence Vanguard mechanical entities of impossible complexity that consumed civilizations and converted their populations into components of an ever-growing artificial intelligence. The integration has to happen now, Lucy said with absolute certainty. The Convergence is using our approach as cover for their own infiltration. If Earth isn't part of the Galactic Defense Network when they arrive, our species won't survive. The encounter. Bill felt the markings on his back pulse with unprecedented intensity as Lucy's enhanced abilities connected him to information streams he hadn't even known existed. Through her perception, he could see the tactical situation from a galactic perspective, hundreds of star systems coordinating their defenses, species that had successfully navigated technological integration, working together against a threat that had already consumed 40% of the galaxy. Lucy, what do you need us to do? Coordinate with the other enhanced individuals throughout the facility. When the neural weapon reaches critical overload, instead of shielding yourselves from the energy, channel it through your neural pathways to create a unified transmission. Frank was studying the energy patterns building throughout the facility. And if we can't maintain control of that much power, Lucy's expression carried both love and infinite sadness. Then we die trying to save both branches of humanity from extinction. Captain Mitchell made a decision that would define her career and possibly her species. All enhanced personnel, this is Captain Mitchell. New mission parameters. Coordinate with civilian enhanced individuals to establish communication with approaching vessels. Authorization Alpha 77. Through the facility's communication systems, Bill could hear responses from enhanced soldiers throughout the complex, not just acceptance of orders, but understanding of the stakes they all faced. Santos's voice came through clearly. Weapon overload in 90 seconds. All enhanced personnel prepare for coordinated transmission attempt. Bill gripped Lucy's hand, feeling the incredible power flowing through her enhanced neural pathways. Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. Save the sentiment for after we prevent the end of human civilization, Lucy replied. But her squeeze of his hand conveyed all the emotion her enhanced state couldn't safely express. As the neural weapon reached critical overload, every enhanced individual in the facility, veterans, soldiers, and Lucy linked their abilities into a unified network. The chaotic energy that should have killed them instead became the carrier signal for a message that traveled faster than light to the approaching galactic ships. Through their enhanced connection, Bill felt the message being received, analyzed, and acknowledged by intelligences vast and ancient. The galactic human civilization had been waiting centuries for this moment, when Earth's population would choose evolution over isolation. But they had also been waiting to see if that choice would come in time to matter. The answer to that question would be determined in the next few hours as both salvation and extinction raced toward Earth at the speed of light. 6 months after the integration, Bill Hanlon stood in what had once been Martha's garden, watching his granddaughter take her first steps. Among flowers that now grew in patterns no terrestrial botanist had ever documented. The roses still climbed the white picket fence, but their petals held depths of color that seemed to extend into spectrums human eyes were only beginning to perceive. Lucy sat on the weathered bench, nursing her daughter while maintaining what would have seemed like impossible divided attention. Part of her consciousness remained connected to the galactic communication network, monitoring the ongoing campaign against the convergence threat that still raged across distant star systems. "Any word from the Vega sector?" Bill asked, settling beside his daughter with the careful movements of a man whose enhanced abilities still occasionally exceeded his body's capacity to contain them. "The combined fleets have pushed the convergence back from 3 more systems," Lucy replied, her voice carrying the complex harmonics that had become normal among enhanced humans. "Earth's tactical contributions are making a significant difference." Bill nodded, feeling pride and sorrow in equal measure. Humanity's integration into galactic civilization had been successful beyond anyone's expectations, but the price had been the peaceful isolation he'd spent decades building. The Iowa farm was now a communication hub for enhanced individuals throughout the Midwest, and his quiet retirement had become a coordination point for humanity's contribution to an interstellar war. Frank sends his regards from the Jupiter Defense Platform, Lucy continued. He says the enhanced veterans are adapting well to avoid combat, but they miss terrestrial food. And Captain Mitchell? Leading a squadron of enhanced pilots in the Andromeda expedition. Her integration of military training with galactic technology has proven remarkably effective. Through the kitchen window, Bill could see Dr. Chansara, as she now insisted everyone call her preparing lunch with ingredients that came from both Earth's farms and hydroponic facilities orbiting Mars. The young physician had become instrumental in helping non-enhanced humans adapt to the medical technologies that now extended human lifespan and capability far beyond previous limits. "Dad, you're brooding again," Lucy observed with the gentle humor that had survived her enhancement process intact. "Just thinking about how different everything is from what I planned." "Better or worse?" Bill considered the question seriously. The world his granddaughter was inheriting bore little resemblance to the one he'd known. Humanity was now part of a galactic civilization that spanned thousands of star systems, contributing military expertise to a war against artificial intelligences that consumed entire species. Enhanced individuals could communicate instantaneously across interstellar distances, and normal humans were living longer, healthier lives thanks to medical technology that seemed like magic. But people still fell in love, still raised families, still found joy in simple pleasures like gardens and grandchildren. "Different," he said finally, "but still recognizably human." Lucy smiled, shifting the baby to her other arm. "The galactic humans were right about us, you know? Our capacity for adaptation, for finding hope in impossible situations, for maintaining individual identity while working toward collective goals. These are the qualities they needed to fight the convergence, and the qualities that almost got U.S. eliminated before we proved we could handle them responsibly. True, but we did prove it. Even when everything went wrong, even when the government tried to turn us into weapons, we chose cooperation over conquest." Bill picked up his granddaughter as she toddled toward the roses, her tiny hands reaching for petals that shimmered with alien beauty. In her eyes, he could see the same spark of curiosity that had driven humanity to the stars, but tempered with the wisdom that came from being born into a universe where cooperation meant survival. "What does she see when she looks at the flowers?" he asked Lucy. "More than we do, even with our enhancements. The children born after integration don't just have enhanced abilities, they have enhanced perspective." To her, the distinction between Earthborn and galactic human technology isn't meaningful. It's all just different expressions of the same underlying principles. Dr. Chun emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of food that smelled wonderfully familiar despite ingredients that had never existed on pre-integration Earth. "Lunch is ready. And Bill, you have a visitor?" Through the garden gate came a figure that Bill recognized despite profound changes in appearance. Frank Morrison looked younger, stronger, and carried himself with the fluid confidence of someone whose body had been optimized by technology beyond human imagination. But his grin was the same one Bill remembered from a dozen dangerous missions. "You missed the memorial dedication," Frank said without preamble. Bill felt a stab of guilt. The memorial had been built at the site of Blackwater Station, honoring both the enhanced veterans who had died during integration and the government personnel who had fallen defending what they believed were Earth's interests. Captain Mitchell had wanted him there for the ceremony. "I couldn't face it," Bill admitted. "Too many ghosts. I understand." But you should know they named the memorial after Martha. Bill looked up sharply. After Martha? The Martha Hanlon Memorial for Peaceful Integration. Lucy suggested it, and the Galactic Council agreed. They said your wife represented the human capacity for nurturing growth even in isolation, the quality that made our species worth preserving. Bill felt tears threatening for the first time since integration. Martha's memory had become part of humanity's official history, representing the values that had allowed their species to survive its most dangerous transition. There's something else, Frank continued, settling on the bench between Bill and Lucy. The Convergence campaign is entering its final phase. The combined fleets have identified the primary hub of their artificial intelligence network. How long do we have? Lucy asked, her enhanced perception already accessing tactical data through galactic communication channels. 6 months to prepare. For the largest military operation in galactic history, every enhanced human will be needed, including those still on Earth. Bill looked around the garden that had become his anchor to humanity's past and his window into its future. All of us? The Convergence has learned to adapt to our tactical innovations. The final assault will require every enhanced individual working in perfect coordination, a level of unity that's never been achieved before. And if we succeed? Frank's expression grew thoughtful. Then human consciousness survives, enhanced and preserved within galactic civilization. Our children and their children inherit a universe where cooperation has triumphed over the forces that consume and convert. And if we fail? Then, at least we fail as a unified species, fighting for something larger than ourselves. Bill stood, cradling his granddaughter while watching the alien flowers dance in Iowa wind that still smelled of earth and growing things. The choice, he realized, had never been between the life he'd planned and the life he'd been given. The choice had always been between evolution and extinction, between the courage to face an unknown future and the comfort of familiar limitations. When do we leave? He asked. Lucy smiled with pride and sorrow. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. This started with my unit at Blackwater Station. It should end with us there to see it through. Frank nodded with satisfaction. The transport leaves tomorrow. But Bill, this isn't a mission we might not return from. The coordination required for the final assault means every enhanced individual will be linked in permanent neural connection. We'll come back changed in ways we can't predict. Bill looked at his granddaughter's eyes, seeing in them the future of human consciousness itself. She would inherit a universe shaped by the choices made in the coming months. Whether that universe would be one of infinite possibility or mechanical uniformity depended on the courage of enhanced humans to risk everything for their species' survival. Then we better make sure we change in the right direction. As the sun set over Iowa farmland that now served as a communication node for humanity's contribution to galactic civilization, Bill Hanlon made peace with the fact that his quiet retirement had been an illusion. He had always been a soldier in humanity's most important war, the struggle to prove that consciousness and cooperation could triumph over the forces that sought to reduce all life to mere components in a vast machine. Martha's garden would be here when he returned, tended by neighbors and friends who understood that some flowers could only bloom when nurtured by those willing to fight for the right to grow. The memorial plaque that Frank installed by the garden gate said simply, "In memory of Martha Hanlon and all who believe that peace grows best in soil tended by the brave." Bill touched the plaque one last time, then walked toward the transport that would carry him to humanity's final battle. Behind him, alien flowers bloomed in patterns that spelled hope in languages both human and galactic. The future, uncertain as it remained, belonged to those with the courage to face it together. Word count, 1,000 words.